the quiet streets of Silver Lake, where luxury speaks louder than words, a single flashing patrol car broke the silence. Officer Alex Carter, known for his controversial record, locked his eyes on a woman walking toward her sleek black car. Eva Anderson. A name he didn't know, but someone who didn't fit the image he'd decided belonged there. Carter's suspicion wasn't rooted in behavior, it was rooted in prejudice. What should have been another uneventful night turned into a confrontation that would expose far more than either of them could have imagined. But Eva wasn't just anyone. She was calm, composed, and carried a silent strength that matched her striking blue scarf, a memory of her mother and a badge of her own resilience. She was a woman on a mission. But what Officer Carter didn't know, what he couldn't see beneath the surface, was the weight of the badge she carried herself. Eva was a federal agent, trained to protect the nation's most powerful figures. What happened next would send shockwaves far beyond Silver Lake, setting off a chain of events that no one could stop. This wasn't just about one woman or one officer. It was about the unchecked power of authority meeting someone who refused to bow to it. And it all began that night, in those quiet streets under the glaring red and blue lights of Officer Carter's patrol car. Under the harsh glare of his patrol car's flashing lights, Officer Alex Carter leaned in toward Eva Anderson's car window. His tone was sharp, laced with accusations. He questioned her presence, his words dripping with bias. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, making no effort to conceal his suspicions. Eva, calm but wary, handed over her identification and vehicle documents. Yet Carter didn't waver. Despite every document being in order, he wasn't satisfied. His gaze narrowed, lingering on Eva's blue scarf as though it were a challenge to his authority. Without cause, Carter ordered her out of the car. Eva complied, her movements deliberate, her composure intact. But the officer's intentions became clearer as he began to search her car without consent or a warrant, his hands rifling through her belongings, searching for justification. When Carter reached the trunk, his search took a sudden turn. He froze, staring at a sleek leather folder marked with bold letters, "Internal Police Misconduct Investigation." The color drained from his face as he flipped through the pages. This wasn't just a random file, it was evidence, potentially damning evidence, connected to Ava's position as a federal agent. Ava stood firm, her voice steady but resolute. "You've crossed the line," she said, her gaze fixed on Carter's growing unease. He realized now who he was dealing with. This wasn't an ordinary civilian. This was someone who knew her rights and his limits. As tension thickened, a figure emerged from the shadows, a security guard from the nearby club. He'd recognized Eva earlier that evening, watching as she left her meeting. Now, from a safe distance, his phone's camera was recording every moment of the unfolding drama. Then came the unmistakable sound of a powerful engine. A sleek black SUV pulled up to the curb, and out stepped Marcus Bennett, Eva's husband. His military uniform gleamed under the patrol lights, a stark contrast to Carter's shaken demeanor. Marcus wasted no time. "What's going on here?" he demanded, his voice calm yet commanding. Marcus stood by Ava, his presence towering, his words cutting through the tension. He asserted her innocence, questioning the legality of Carter's actions. But the officer, cornered yet defiant, refused to back down. Carter reached for his radio, calling for backup. Within minutes, additional patrol cars arrived, their red and blue lights flooding the quiet street. Among the responding officers was Sergeant Paul Grant, a seasoned leader with years of experience. He approached with measured authority, assessing the scene as Carter relayed his version of events, painting Eva as suspicious. The security guard, sensing the gravity of the moment, stepped forward. Holding his phone high, he declared, "I've recorded everything from the start." The officers paused, exchanging uneasy glances as the weight of the situation began to shift. The video left no room for Carter's justifications. His actions, now exposed, were indefensible. Sergeant Grant turned to Carter, his voice firm. "Hand over your badge and weapon. You're suspended effective immediately." Carter's face burned with anger and humiliation. As he handed over his badge, his frustration boiled over. In a fit of rage, he shouted, "You think this ends with me? I'm not the only one." His words, spoken in anger, hinted at something much deeper, a system that enabled and protected abuse. The silence that followed was heavy. Ava and Marcus exchanged a glance, knowing that this was no longer just about one officer. This was about an entire system that needed to be exposed. And as Carter was escorted away, the first cracks in that system had begun to show. The following day, the once quiet Silver Lake community was jolted by the news of the confrontation. Ava and Marcus knew this wasn't just a personal victory, it was an opportunity to ignite change. Together, they stood before a packed press conference, their voices clear and unyielding. Eva shared her story, her words resonating with the weight of lived experience. She described the night's events in vivid detail, punctuated by the security guard's video, which was now irrefutable evidence of Carter's abuse. Marcus spoke next, his military stature and commanding voice driving home the importance of accountability and reform. Their proposals were simple but bold: mandatory bias training for officers, body cameras on all personnel, and independent oversight to ensure that no officer could operate above the law. The press conference quickly gained national attention. The footage circulating across news networks and sparking a movement for systemic reform. But Eva and Marcus knew that headlines alone wouldn't bring lasting change. They turned their focus to the people, the voices often left unheard. In community centers, churches, and local schools, they listened to stories from others who had faced similar injustices. At each meeting, Eva spoke of her experience, not as a victim, but as a fighter determined to stand for justice. Marcus, leveraging his reputation as a decorated veteran, rallied support from fellow servicemen and women, reminding them of the values they'd sworn to protect. Together, they built a coalition of veterans, local leaders, and activists, united in their resolve to hold the system accountable. In one emotional gathering, an elderly man stood up and said, "I've seen this my whole life, but I never thought I'd see someone fight back. Thank you for giving us hope." Those words became fuel for their mission, proof that their fight was not in vain. Weeks later, the city council chamber was filled to capacity. Lawmakers, journalists, and members of the public crowded the room, their eyes fixed on Eva as she stepped up to the podium. Her blue scarf, now a symbol of resilience, rested lightly on her shoulders as she faced the council. Her voice was steady, her words deliberate. She recounted every detail of that night, pairing her testimony with the damning video evidence. "This isn't just about one officer's actions," she declared. "This is about a system that allows such behavior to thrive unchecked. We must change it." Eva presented her proposals: retraining officers to address implicit bias, equipping all officers with body cameras monitored by an independent agency, and creating an oversight body composed of community representatives. The crowd listened intently, and by the time she finished, the chamber erupted in applause. Even some lawmakers, initially hesitant, began to engage in serious discussions about her ideas. The fallout was swift. Officer Carter was taken into custody, his actions triggering a broader investigation into the department's practices. As the probe deepened, evidence of systemic issues began to surface, implicating other officers and senior officials. But for Eva and Marcus, this was just the beginning. They committed to pushing for further reforms, knowing the battle for justice would be long and arduous. That night, as Eva sat in her home office, the blue scarf draped over her chair, she reflected on the journey. Her father's words echoed in her mind: "If you know you're fighting for what's right, never give up." Marcus entered the room, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We've started something big," he said, "and we'll see it through." Ava nodded, her resolve unwavering. Their story became a rallying cry, a reminder that injustice thrives in silence. Ava's fight wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone willing to stand up for what's right. The documentary ends with a direct message to the audience. Are you ready to challenge the systems that perpetuate injustice? Share your story, speak your truth, and demand accountability. Together, we can build a fairer future. The screen fades to black, but Eva's voice lingers. The fight for justice never ends. It begins with us.